When you think about the Grim Reaper, you probably imagine one of three things. 1. Grim from Billy and Mandy, which makes you old. Yeah, Billy and Mandy was 21 years ago, get over it. Next, there's number 2, Death from Puss in Boots, and in this case, you're a child. Or a furry. Either way, you need to go to church. Just kidding, you furry guys are alright. And finally, there's number 3. Those badass skeletons with the guns and the fire and the evil stuff. This is the only right option. And if you disagree, I'll help you pack right now. I used to think these were the only 3 options. But there actually is a 4th one. Oh, would you look at that? Hello, I am Goose, and I want to welcome you to How I Feel About, a series where I tell you what I think of whatever's on my mind. No more, no less. And on the docket today, we have something real special. Have a Nice Death is a 2D hand-drawn roguelite that came out in March of 2023, published by Gearbox and developed by Magic Design Studios, who have done excellent work in their other game, Unruly Heroes. I've been excited about Have a Nice Death ever since I saw a trailer for it in a Nintendo Direct a few months ago. Don't know why I still watch those when I don't have a Switch. I wrote this script before I bought an OLED to play Tears of the Kingdom. My bad. Anyways, as an avid Hollow Knight enjoyer, I saw Have a Nice Death, which I will be referring to as Hand for the rest of the video for the sake of the word count, and upon seeing Hand, my sheep brain went, "Oh, this looks like Hollow Knight! Look at the main character, he looks like the guy from Hollow Knight! Wow, wow, wow!" But now I am learned and smart and not stupid, so while I goofed around waiting for the game to come out, I looked into it and learned more about it. And upon the game's release, I hopped on that right away. Even earlier, actually, because I got early access. So I've had quite a bit of playtime, and after all my time playing, I've gotta hand it to the devs at Magic Design Studios. This game is quite the time. It's got its ups and downs, but I have fun with it. Anyways, I've spent way too long introducing everything. It's about time I told you how I feel about Have a Nice Death. Now, before I get into the video, I feel the need to give a little disclaimer, which apparently I do in every single video I ever record. This video, while not directly depicting the subjects showed in the game in great detail, still contains representations of difficult and harmful work conditions, as well as complicated mental health topics, such as suicide, addiction, burnout, harassment, and anxiety. Despite these topics being portrayed in a humorous tone in Have a Nice Death, they may be upsetting to certain viewers regardless, which is why I figured I should warn you. Which is also why the game warned you on the title screen. So good on them for getting on that. Okay, let's begin. Now buckle up. I'm not the kind of person to draw out a video's length, as I tend to be a very to-the-point kind of person, especially when it comes to YouTube stuff. I hate wasting people's time. But I think I'm gonna go directly against my word this time, because I'm gonna start with my initial assumptions on this game. When I first got ambushed by this game during that Nintendo Direct, I think it was November, I was taken aback by such a pretty thing going on that little console. Have a Nice Death looked beautiful on first glance, the gameplay appeared to be buttery smooth, and the music in the trailer was slick! Have a Nice Death had me hooked from the very beginning. One teeny tiny little detail, though, you see, it's actually a pretty funny, maybe alright, let me just, how does this word make you feel? Now, some people don't see as much of an issue with the word, or rather the games in the genre, I should say. I try to be willing to give any game a chance, even if it's some drivel like the yearly COD installment, but the last roguelike I played was Mana Spark, and if you watch my reviews, which I doubt you do, you'd know that I didn't particularly enjoy every aspect of it. Okay, in hindsight, I feel like I was a little bit harsh. I don't like being mean, but I'd rather be too harsh than not harsh enough. I'm not against roguelikes. There are good ones like Enter the Gungeon and Hades, but the last one I played left me with a really sour taste in my mouth. In any case, I was willing to put that aside to try out this game, as it seemed too good to not give a chance. So, initial assumptions, I was cautiously optimistic for Have a Nice Death, and was gonna wait patiently for it to come out in March. Now then, enough about me. Let's get into the game, starting with the story of Have a Nice Death. The plot of Hand tends to stay in the background as the focus is more on the gameplay, which I prefer, to be honest. Now, for the sake of me having energy to finish this giant script, I'll just read the synopsis on their website in my own words. In this game, you play as Death. In the past, it was pretty simple. Death would take the souls of the dying himself and they would travel to the afterlife. You know, the standard Shabbat. But over time, the Earth's population grew, and the paperwork associated with each individual death began to pile up quite fast, and Death was on the verge of burnout, realizing he couldn't do it alone. So, he created a league of high-level executives who would do his dirty work for him, which would have him as the CEO to handle the paperwork. And for a time, this company system, which the Grim Reaper humbly dubbed Death Incorporated, worked swimmingly. That was until the Sorrows began to run a bit wild. They rampaged all over the globe, taking more souls than the company protocol authorized, and so Death, quite literally crippled physically by the fast-growing ocean of paperwork in his office, and on the verge of total burnout, decided that he needed to get to the bottom of this mystery before it kills him. Who's causing this total overload of deaths, and what was their end goal with overwhelming the Grim Reaper with all this excessive paperwork? And maybe once he reclaims control of Death Incorporated, he could secure himself a much-needed vacation. So, you simply go through the different departments of Death Inc., discipline the Sorrows that head said departments, and slowly work your way through the entire company until you fix the whole thing, and save yourself from any more headache. So yeah, that's the long and short of the plot. Most of it is in the opening cutscene, and it goes a little more in depth in the game, but most of the early plot stuff is spelled out on the website. Aside from the general story, all of the employees stationed in the various departments of Death Inc. are overflowing with character, and the charming art style only amplifies the cast's likability. It's also a big help that the writing in this game is entertaining as well, since that does a lot of the heavy lifting for making these characters likable, whether it be the supporting cast or the antagonists. Speaking of which, some of the standouts of the Have a Nice Death cast are Pump Quinn, Harriet, Brad, and this guy with the disco ball for a head. But of course, the standout in this game is Death himself, whose dry sarcasm and dark whimsy makes his interactions with anyone in the cast a real joy. You can tell he's just a good man trying to do his job, but he's just so exhausted. And honestly, me too, bro. I think my biggest complaint about the story is related to the dialogue, but I don't think it was something that they could fix. I think the problem I have is baked directly into the choice of setting. I know it's the whole point, but all this office talk just kinda makes me wanna... Boring! Huh? The dialogue is very mundane to correlate with the whole office aesthetic. Now, they do have some fun things to do with it, as they inject the whole death thing into it and add some witty dialogue. I warmed up to the office talk later on, but I know some players won't be particularly interested in the bland droll of undead 9-to-5 workers. There are some characters I would love to talk about right now, like Mr. OSHA, but he's more prominent in the gameplay section, which we'll get to in a moment. But before that, I want to talk about the development of the game. The game was introduced at the Game Awards in 2021 and went into early access in March 2022. Wait a second. March 2022. It was in early access for a year? Well, yeah, that's how I got around to playing it in October of 2022. Throughout the early access, the game got updated and added to until it was fully finished and released in 2023. As for why the game became what it was, I did some digging and found an interview with Meredith Alfroy and Simon Duterte of Magic Design Studios to discuss some aspects of the game. I'll read out some excerpts from the interview to help you all get a good grasp of how the game came to be. How did Death, both as a concept and a character, become the focal point of the game? Nico had a long-standing interest in Gothic themes. While designing the Death character, he imagined a Death who was constantly busy and exhausted by the task of collecting souls, due to the high mortality rate on Earth, caused by war, diseases, etc. This immediately led the team to think of the world of work. Thus, we decided to portray Death as the CEO of a large corporation, overwhelmed by the demands of their job. Our goal was also to explore the possibilities of integrating this character into our current world, specifically in the context of the corporate world. By doing so, we wanted to delve into deeper themes such as burnout, disinterest, laziness, narcissism, and disrespect that are prevalent in today's society and are often associated with the corporate world. We hope to offer a thought-provoking reflection on the state of the world of work and its impact on individuals and society as a whole through this character and the story we've created around it. There's a lot more stuff that's less relevant to the game's development, more like cosmetic stuff or lore-heavy garbage, and I'll link the full interview in the description so you can read it for yourself if you want to, but that's not the focus of this video anymore. We are going on to gameplay, finally. Let's begin with how Death controls, and we immediately run into a massive issue. Despite Death being a small little guy, the Grim Reaper cannot do a cute little duck by pressing down on the control stick, thus ruining the entire game, destroying everything that had built up to that point, and I couldn't even bear to play through the first tutorial section, and I'm completely kidding, of course I didn't quit. Death controls smoother than a greased-up fat dude sliding around in a bathtub. You think I would completely abandon a game because of something that has no impact on the gameplay? I would never do something so ridiculous. Most of the time. Brushing that aside, Death has been fine-tuned to perfection in how he moves around. Your only additional movement ability, aside from jumping and walking, is a dash forward, but it's instantaneous and takes you quite a distance, so it's a big help when platforming. Speaking of, our little skull-headed friend tends to cut corners in movement, literally. So if you dash into a wall and you're near the top or bottom of it, he'll save you the trouble of bumping into it and just coast along the edge to keep moving forward. It makes the game feel really smooth. And in combat, your attack button combines with the directional input and the dash to increase your movement options, adding upward, downward, and aerial movement to your kit, letting you get tons of airtime off of enemies if you know how to use your tools right. Speaking of tools, holy moly, do you have a lot of toys to mess around with in this jungle gym of a game. Customization of your arsenal is no issue, as just about every part of Death's kit is customizable with things you'll collect during your journey. Aside from his appearance, nothing's beating that cloak. Except for maybe a trendy hat. For starters, you get to select your primary weapon at the start of the run, with each one changing the way you engage with enemies. Alongside your primary, there are two other things that you can collect throughout your runs. Firstly, curses. At certain intervals, you'll encounter Mr. OSHA. He'll give you a choice between some randomly selected curses, which actually do the opposite and buff you during the oncoming journey. You can pick as many curses as you want, so long as you can keep running into Mr. OSHA with each floor. The curses do get the penalty of buffing enemies if you pick up too many, so make sure to manage the risk. Alongside curses, you can find spells in specific rooms, which are some of the more powerful abilities that consume mana when used. These spells vary greatly, from a powerful but short-ranged hammer swing, to a fast-moving ball of poison, to just a straight-up meteor shower. And since you can have two spells equipped at any time, the number of combinations of spells, curses, and primary weapons you can have skyrockets, which gives you heavy customizability on how you approach challenges, so long as you can get lucky enough to get the ones you want. Now that I've sung the praises of the game, I should probably mention the aspects I'm not huge on. Let's start with the basic potential negatives in a roguelike. In most games of this genre, you'll probably wind up replaying the game several times before actually getting to an ending. And the most crushing part of a roguelike is losing all your progress because you either choked, or entered a new area, or encountered a new enemy you couldn't figure out in time and die. Now, Hand kind of warmed me up to roguelikes again, but I understand that restarting over and over with little visible progress is a little annoying or demoralizing to some people, so just take that as you will. On top of that, the luck aspect of the items you get doesn't really allow your pure skill to earn you victory, as some spells are very much superior to others and make combat easier. But honestly, I can shrug the luck stuff off. In fact, I enjoy the luck aspect of roguelikes. I'm not super anal about RNG unless it's super pivotal to victory. Or just extremely annoying, like Mario Kart 8. The item RNG is so annoying in that game! Just give me a mushroom! The real issue is that despite how sprawling and deep these rooms, canals, and pathways go, there's not really anything of substance at the end of all the passageways. The only things at the end of these trails you have to go out of your way to find are either one or two enemies that you can just kind of cap and move on, or like a tiny bit of soulary. That's what this game calls money. See, it's like soul and salary. That's very clever. And sometimes there won't even be anything in those secret trails. They'll just lead to the main path again. The areas in Hand have a lot of nooks and crannies that seem like there's secrets within, but there's not anything hiding there. So there's little to no incentive to do anything but just dash straight to the end of the room, unless you want to defeat all the enemies in the level or pick up the money that's at the end of the trails. That's not really worth the trouble. I can sort of ignore that though. You're not forced to search through those nooks and crannies, but it's just a waste of potential for secrets. Like a sort of Metroid Dread situation with how many secrets were hiding in the labyrinths. However, I do want to complete the compliment sandwich here, so I can't talk about the negatives of a roguelike without mentioning the positives as well. The variety they bring is the main thing. The gameplay loop being the same thing over and over and over and over might make it appear to be kind of bland to replay, but what makes the variety is what you can find within the world. And Hand, from my experience, absolutely shreds any other roguelike I've played. For starters, everything you're able to collect in the levels is randomized, even before you start a run. See, before you enter the elevator, you have the option to sign a number of contracts, all completely randomized, and start you with different perks and risks. Next, once you actually start, you have a choice between some randomly selected weapons, which alter the way you interact with enemies you face. Then, there's the spells you can get, and that's a really big can. You might go half the run without getting a proper spell, or you could be decked to the nines before you reach the second department. Upon entering the elevator at the end, the rooms you can go next are also randomized, and you even have split paths for which departments you get to go to at certain points. Even the dialogue changes over time. Not even like the usual basic speech, like the game will recognize the time of year and make office banter about holidays. Stuff like Secret Santa gifts, April Fool's pranks, and Halloween parties. That's a really good attention to detail, it's really appreciated. I don't think I've ever heard the same line of dialogue in my replays of the game. Every time I encountered a boss or got a curse from Mr. Osha, there was always something unique being said. The variety fascinates me. Even after completing the game, there are additional difficulty modes you can play which ramp up the challenge by a meaty degree. It's seriously brutal. I was gonna do a whole bit that was like, oh, here's how a usual run of the game goes, but it's hard to think of what a usual run for a game that's so diverse in its setup would be. So much can change between one run and another, and I'll guarantee you that you won't play a run that feels the same as another. Again, the amount of things that change from one run to another make this game one of the most diverse roguelikes I've ever played. Tallying all the points, the pros heavily outweigh the cons, but there are some clear areas where there was some stuff left to be desired. You know where they didn't leave much room for improvement? Ooh, them graphics. Them some good pixels right there. That's the good stuff. First, there's the art style as a whole. The game sells itself on its beautiful, hand-drawn animation, and they were not lying about that quality. Everything in the game is hand-drawn with love and care, and all the cadaver caricatures in both the foreground and background have a crazy amount of detail, which I think really sells the theme of overload and the like. Nothing in the game sticks out too much in terms of art style either, and the character designs are all delightful, be it in a gross way or a cute way, because this art style can really nail either way, whether it be deranged, monstrous, or the adorable little guy, oh look at him! The way the cast looks multiplies the charm of the characters you interact with throughout the game by a considerable degree. Very nice. Not only the supporting cast, but the Sorrows animations are absolutely stellar. They all have smooth, dynamic movements to their attacks that telegraph their moveset very well, excluding this general guy. Actually, fuck this dude. And the effects on attacks, both yours and enemies, all have a lovely glow to them, and they flash brightly against the grim tones of the usual platforming. There's only one place where there is a ton of color, but I'm not gonna tell you. Play the game yourself and find out. Just, man, this game is nice to look at. Talk about eye candy. Art style aside, I find myself fascinated by not only how Hand presents its gameplay elements, but its general theming. The game seems to have the aesthetic of progressive era architecture, which I infer through the look of the elevator and the CEO's office. And if you know me, I love early to mid 1900s stuff. Now that's mostly steam locomotives, but I do love me some 20th century architecture. Also probably a coincidence, but workplace abuse and harassment was worst in the mid 1800s to early 1900s, so the architecture hinting at that date is a nice touch on the death situation, even if not intentional. Aside from the architecture, the monochromatic color palette might emphasize the time period as well. Okay, that might be a bit of a stretch. I think they did it because it looks nice. But regardless, there's still a hint of color in each respective area, some more than others, but I think the restraint in the use of colors really helps emphasize the whole being dead thing. Overall, yeah, this game just looks fantastic. But do you know what's just as important as sight? Let's talk about what Have a Nice Death is like on the old eardrums. The soundtrack for Hand is just... wow. It's probably my favorite aspect of the game artistically, I won't even lie. The composer for Hand, Alexis Laguerre, really went above and beyond with the composition for the OST. There's just so much going on in these tracks. Usually I'd have more to say before I play some stuff, but I want to play you some of my favorite tracks right now, and it's my video, and you're gonna listen! First, the title screen theme. Instantly introduces you to the main motif of the game, which can I add as a super neat little handful of notes. The use of the wispy sounds at the beginning, only to add in the horns and strings after that, it's fantastic. I think the elevator music is pretty good too. It's a nice juxtaposition from the whole, death aspect, with this jazzy nice lounge theme. You only ever hear it with a filter in the game, which adds to the charm, but I love the funk they injected into that short little jam. The Hall of Eternity is a really good track to start off your grim journey through Death Inc. The mini-boss music is so silly, but then it randomly goes so hard? What is this sorcery? Brad's theme starts all simple and swag. Seriously though, this sounds awesome. But then the fight actually starts and the serotonin really starts flowing. I think my favorite music in the soundtrack is probably Toxic Food Processing. I'm a sucker for organs and saxophones, and it just delivers with flying colors. I can't stand how much I like this soundtrack. It's infuriating. Then you get to the disease division and all of a sudden you're put on edge by these frantic strings. And I think my favorite part of the music is how dynamic it is. Like, the regular theme will randomly merge perfectly into the battle theme, and then once the battle's over, it'll go right back into the regular theme. I think it's fascinating that it can get itself into so many different genres and still just rock it. There are so many more tracks I would love to gush about, but A, I don't want this video to take over an hour, and B, I don't want to spoil any more bangers. Play the game, at least listen to the soundtrack, man. Come on, it sounds so good. Really quick, and I don't usually have a lot to say on this subject, but I love how soft the sound design is. Despite the violence that occurs in this game, what with the hacking and slashing and scything and killing, none of the sounds are particularly harsh. There's an enemy that drops landmines, and even then the explosion is mellow. You take damage, whether it be from the fire-headed office workers to weird cancerous crabs, or Brad. Taking damage just gives you a little record scratch. The one thing a piece of media can do to take me out of the experience is making the sound effects too loud. Only time that's happened is, 2018 Hellboy movie? That one was pretty rough. Anyways, Have a Nice Death is not that, so we're fine. Oh yeah, one more thing. The cast of Hand speaks in a pseudo-Banjo-Kazooie gibberish that adds to the cartoony edge that they give this grim portrayal of burnout, anxiety, and harsh working conditions. But yeah, that's all for sound. Good stuff. Now it's time for a section I like to call Best Part, Worst Part. When I played Hand, I enjoyed some bits and wasn't big on other bits, so I just look at both ends of the spectrum and figure out how high the peaks are and how low the valleys are. So, let's start with the best part. Let's see. There was this one run I went on a while back that was absolutely insane. I had arguably two of the best spells in the game with a souped-up mana bar, meaning that I was able to run through rooms and just annihilate everything in my path without having to worry about my mana gauge. You know how when a racehorse becomes lame, they have to, quote, destroy them, unquote? You didn't? Yeah, that's what they call it when they have to kill a racehorse. No, it's true! Not even putting it down. Look it up. They actually say destroy. Anyways, that's what I was doing on this run. I actually got pretty far on that run. I felt fucking invincible. Unfortunately, this run ties into what I consider the worst part of the game. The boss of the part I got stuck on, I don't want to spoil who it is, but he's a little shit. I kept getting stuck on this boss on so many runs. I would repeatedly get to him, but I would just get overwhelmed so fast, not really learning anything when I get there because I die so fast. While it felt like a huge difficulty spike, I now know that I was just misunderstanding the attack patterns he had. That really had me for a good while, but I understand now. I probably shouldn't be judging the game on my stupidity, but I want you to know what really irked me. Well, actually, you know what? This whole video is an opinion piece, so I'm going to judge this game directly off of my stupidity! But I'm smarter now. I wasn't then, but I am now. And man, was that military guy just the worst. Oops, I accidentally spoiled it. Now, what else could there be to the game? Why, stuff that's not in the game. Of course, I'm talking about additional content. Now, this section usually applies for game expansions and stuff like that, but considering this game only just came out, well, I guess just is pretty relative to when I wrote the script. Anyways, there are only two things I have to talk about to you guys. First, there's the art book. I cannot recommend the art book for Have a Nice Death enough. Over 80 pages filled to the brim with art, including the characters, settings, set dressing, and even information about specific aspects of the game. Mainly the cast, both good and bad. Secondly, there's the soundtrack. You already know whether or not you should get this. Just nothing but pure goodness from this one. Just incredible tunes. The art book is free when you buy the game, you just need to download it from the Steam store. And the soundtrack is only $6. Over an hour and a half of music for almost $5? That's a crazy bargain! That's highway robbery! But yeah, that's all for additional content. So, after all that in-depth explanation, and 9 pages later, how do I feel about Have a Nice Death? Well, let's look back at the pros and cons together. Pros. The game is smooth to control, plain and simple. This is paramount to enjoying any game. On top of that, it's also full of variety, making repeated play sessions feel less grating to go through. And even if I had to ignore the gameplay aspect, the game looks pretty as all hell. And there are some banger tracks that are going right into my phone. Not even joking, I downloaded some of these once I finished recording this. However, now it's time for some cons. The amount of things that there are for you to deal with in the game may be a bit overwhelming for players new to the genre. Can't deny that, even if I don't think it's a big deal. Next, the difficulty of a roguelike. By that I mean the potential frustration and repetition roguelikes tend to bring. My experience was mostly pleasant, there was far too much to be happy about and far too little to be upset about. While the difficulty may have felt a little goofy silly at times in my playthrough, it was a consistent level of quality throughout the whole experience. Have a Nice Death is one of the prettiest, smoothest, and most replayable games I've ever gotten my grubby little goose mitts on. If I had to give it a rating, let's see, I don't want to pick out a 10 anymore. You know what? I've been in a percentage mood lately, so how about, 88%. Yeah, that sounds about right. I give Have a Nice Death a solid 88%. No, 89. 89%. It's definitely jumped up to one of my favorite games I've played recently. Okay, I think that's all I've got. So, what'd you guys think? This video is kind of a soft reboot for the How I Feel About series. I'm kind of going in more of an informatory, in-depth direction with the How I Feel About videos. So I hope you all enjoy where this takes us. A few general housekeeping things before I sign off for this video. I have Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Newgrounds, and very recently Itaku, which I'll put in the description. There's a Discord server for the YouTube channel, the link for that will also be down there. And I have a separate channel for my archived VODs and just other videos that haven't made it on the main channel, if you're interested in seeing content not present here. Oh, right, also the fan art! If you want to see your fan art featured in the outro, like what's scrolling right now, make sure you either tag me on the social medias I just mentioned, or send it in the fan art channel in my Discord server. I'll put the newest ones in this little film roll at the end of videos. Okay, I think that's all I've got. So, without further ado, let's end this thing. My name is Goose, I thank you very much for watching, and I hope you take care of yourself. You're gonna do great, whatever it is. Now go away!